Have you ever caught your reflection unexpectedly, maybe in the bathroom mirror early in the morning, or in the dark screen of your phone before it lights up, or in a store window while walking past, and for just a second you stopped? Not because of how you looked, not because of age, not because of tired eyes or another line on your face, but because something deeper felt unfamiliar. Like you were looking at someone you know, but also someone you haven't fully met in a long time. And maybe you couldn't explain why. Maybe nothing dramatic happened in that moment. You just stood there for a second longer than usual. Quiet, still, and something inside whispered, "What happened to me? Where did I go?" Not your body, not your name, not for this, not your everyday life, but you. The you that used to feel lighter. The you that laughed without thinking. The you that believed things could work out. The you that prayed and expected peace afterward. The you that used to wake up with more energy in your spirit. More spark in your eyes. More life inside your heart. The version of you before everything became so heavy. But a poor disappointment sat in your chest. But a full grief made a hole in places words couldn't reach. Before responsibilities piled so high, you forgot what rest felt like. Before survival became your normal. Before strength became something you had to wear every day, whether you felt strong or not. Maybe lately you've been missing that version of yourself. And maybe you miss them quietly. Because it's hard to explain this kind of loss. People understand losing things. People understand losing time. Even losing relationships. But not everyone understands what it feels like to lose touch with yourself while still continuing to live your life. That kind of loss is harder to describe. But from the outside, you still get up, still answer calls, still respond when people speak to you, still pay bills, still handle responsibilities, still show up, still keep moving. Life continues. And because life continues, people assume you're okay. Maybe they even admire how well you carry things, how calm you seem, how dependable you are, how much you handle. And you smile politely. If only you knew how tired I really am. If only you knew how long it's been since I truly felt like myself. There's a kind of weariness that sleep doesn't fix. A tiredness deeper than the body. A tiredness in the soul. The kind that settles into your thoughts, into your emotions, into your prayers, or to the spaces between your words. You can feel it while driving somewhere familiar. You can feel it standing in the kitchen rinsing dishes while the sink water runs and your mind drifts far away. You can feel it folding laundry, sitting in traffic, lying awake while the house is finally quiet. You can feel it when everyone else has gone to sleep and there's nothing left to distract you from yourself. And that's often when the question rises. Softly, where did I go? Where is the version of me I remember? Where is the person I thought I'd be by now? Where is the joy I used to carry more naturally? Where is the faith that once felt simpler? Where is the hope that used to come easier? Where is the person beneath all of this? Maybe that question is why you clicked this video. Maybe you didn't plan to stay this long. Maybe you were scrolling, maybe distracted, maybe doing something else at the same time. But something in these words caught you because it felt personal. But else, it felt close to something you've been carrying privately, maybe for years. And maybe you haven't said it out loud to anyone. Maybe not even to God. Because sometimes the deepest questions don't come out as sentences. Sometimes they live inside us as ache, as longing, as tears that show up unexpectedly, as emotional exhaustion we can't fully explain, as moments where we feel homesick without knowing what we're homesick for. But what if that longing means something? What if the ache inside you isn't random? What if it isn't just burnout or nostalgia or emotional fatigue? What if it's deeper than that? What if the version of you miss, the version beneath the pressure, beneath the heartbreak, beneath the responsibilities, beneath the years of pushing through, still exists? What if they were never truly lost? What if they were never a? What if they were simply buried under everything life placed on top of you? And what if God still sees that version clearly? Not the version people know. Not the this, walk into this by coping. Not the version trained to stay strong. Not the version that learned how to smile while hurting. But the version of you before disappointment entered. Before pain reshaped your confidence. Before fear taught you caution. Before survival became necessary. The version he dreamed of. The version he formed with intention. The version he called good. What if heaven has never lost sight of that person? What if God still sees them? Because maybe people only know the version of you that adopted. But God knows the version underneath. The deeper version, the hidden version. The one buried beneath exhaustion. The one still breathing beneath all the weights. Like a one that still carries purpose. Still carries beauty. Still carries calling. Still carries fire. And if that's true, maybe this isn't just another video playing in the background of your day. Maybe this is a pause, a quiet interruption, a sacred reminder, a whisper to your spirit saying, I haven't forgotten you. Not the real you, not the this, walk into this, not the deepest you, not the this, walk into this, not the version of you pain tried to silence, not the version you think disappeared. I still see you. I still know you. And I never gave up on you. Life doesn't always change us through one dramatic moment. Sometimes it happens slowly, quietly. So quietly you barely notice it while it's happening. Like a wall fading from sunlight over the years. Like footsteps wearing a path into the ground. Like winter arriving one colder morning at a time. And before you realize it, you're still you. And maybe not in ways people can see immediately. The change happened deeper than appearance, deeper than routine, deeper than words. It happened in the hidden parts of you, in how you trust, in how you hope, in how you rest, in how you carry disappointment. In how you brace yourself before expecting good news. Maybe once, maybe you used to speak more freely. Maybe you used to dream bigger. Maybe you once walked into rooms with confidence. Maybe prayer felt natural. Maybe joy came easier. Maybe hope felt safer. Maybe your heart felt softer. Then life happened. And life has a way of touching every part of a person. Sometimes through heartbreak, guilt, sometimes through betrayal, sometimes through rejection, sometimes through loss, sometimes through waiting so long for an answer that your hope begins to feel tired. Sometimes through prayers you believe with your whole heart that seem to remain unanswered. Sometimes through people leaving, people changing, people disappointing you. Sometimes through carrying responsibilities heavier than anyone around you fully understands. And sometimes through simply enduring season after season without much space to breathe. That kind of living changes people. Not because they're weak, because they're human. Pain leaves fingerprints. Disappointment leaves echoes. And exhaustion reshapes a person in ways that aren't always visible. Maybe you became quiet. Not for this, 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 not for this. I'm really not glad. But because life taught you not everything can be explained. Maybe you became more guarded. Not because you stopped caring, but because too many open places were hurt. Maybe you became tired in ways rest couldn't fix. Maybe joy became harder to reach. Maybe dreaming began to feel risky. Maybe expecting too much started to feel dangerous. Maybe you stopped asking for certain things, not because you stopped wanting them, but because wanting them began to hurt. Sometimes pain teaches people how to protect themselves by hoping less. And that can happen so slowly, until one ordinary moment. Maybe standing at the sink. Maybe sitting in the car before going inside. Maybe folding towels fresh from the dryer. Maybe staring at the ceiling late at night while everyone else sleeps. Then suddenly you realize, I don't feel like myself anymore. That realization can feel heartbreaking. Because it's not just grief over what happened around you. It's grief over what happened inside you because of what happened around you. Maybe the betrayal hurt. But what hurts just as deeply is how it changed the way you trust now. Maybe the disappointment hurt, but what stayed with you was how it changed what you expect from life. Maybe the rejection hurt, but even more painful was how it changed the way you see your own worth. Maybe the unanswered prayer hurt, but what lingered was how it changed the way you approach God now. And that kind of pain is hard to explain, because it doesn't always look dramatic from the outside. Sometimes it looks like functioning, like getting through another day, like answering emails, like making dinner, like smiling at neighbors, like going to church, like attending family gatherings, like doing what needs to be done. And all the while, something inside feels tired. Some people listening right now have become experts at carrying pain quietly. You learn how to be dependable while exhausted, how to be present while emotionally absent, how to help others while ignoring your own emptiness, how to stay strong because strength became necessary. And eventually strength stopped feeling like a gift and started feeling like something you couldn't put down. Maybe people tell you, you're so strong, I don't know how you do it. You handle everything so well. And part of you smiles, but another part thinks, damn, if you only knew how hard this feels inside. If you knew how many nights I've sat awake replaying everything. If you knew how much energy it takes to hold all of this together. If you knew how much of me feels missing. This is how people slowly become strangers to themselves. Not through rebellion, not through failure. Years of carrying, years of adjusting, years of becoming who they needed to become to make it through. And maybe that's been your story. But even now, even after all of it, the version of you you miss may not be gone. Maybe hidden, maybe tired, maybe buried under years of pain. But not for this, waiting beneath the surface, waiting to breathe again. There's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being by yourself. It comes from feeling unseen, but not just unseen by people. Unseen in the deeper places, the places no one asks about, the places behind your smile, behind your routine, the places where you carry what never made it into conversation, the things you learned to hold quietly, the disappointments you stopped bringing up because too much time had passed, the prayers you prayed years ago and slowly stopped mentioning, the ache that stayed with you long after everyone assumed you'd moved on, the version of yourself you quietly miss, Because how do you explain that to someone? How do you explain that you're grateful for your life? That you kept going? That you survived? But sometimes don't feel fully connected to the person doing the surviving. Some people know your schedule. Some know your responsibilities. Some know what you do. Some know what you've been through. But very few know what it felt like to go through it as you. What it felt like to lie awake after everyone else was asleep. What it felt like to smile when your heart felt heavy. What it felt like to keep showing up while carrying something no one could see. What it felt like to keep praying while wondering if anyone heard. And maybe that's why this matters so much. Even when nobody else fully saw it. Every part of it, every hidden tear, every exhausted breath, every silent prayer whispered into a pillow. Every moment you sat in your car for an extra few minutes before going inside because you needed a little quiet before facing one more thing. Every time you stared out the kitchen window with your hands resting on the sink and your thoughts somewhere far away. Every time you said, "I'm fine," because explaining it felt too tiring. Every time your chest felt heavy and you couldn't even name why. God saw it. He saw the nights, the waiting, the confusion, the emotional fatigue, the private disappointments, the inner battles no one ever knew you were fighting. And he never once looked away. Not once. He didn't get distracted. He didn't lose interest. He didn't grow tired of you. He didn't say, "They've changed too much now." He didn't say, "I no longer recognize who they've become." No, God has never been confused about who you are. Even when you were. Even when pain blurred your reflection. Even when life covered parts of you so deeply that even you forgot what was underneath. He never forgot. He still knows exactly who he created. Exactly, completely, tenderly. Long before anyone misunderstood you. Long before anyone hurt you. Long before disappointment entered your story. He had already seen your ending. Before the pressure, before the heartbreak, before the seasons that exhausted you, before the mistakes you still revisit in your mind, before the years you sometimes feel slipped away too fast. He knew you, the real you, the quiet version, the hopeful version, the brave version, the soft-hearted version, the version with purpose woven into their being, the version with gifts still inside, the version carrying something holy, even if hidden. And God still sees that person now. Maybe not the way the world sees you. The world sees performance. God sees essence. The world sees productivity. God sees identity. The world sees what you became under pressure. God sees who you were before the pressure ever arrived. And more importantly, he sees who you still are underneath it. That matters because pain has a way of attaching names to us. Failure does that too. So does rejection. So does loss. So does disappointment. But you begin hearing words like too late, too damaged, too much, not enough, forgotten, unworthy, behind, broken, disqualified. And after hearing those messages enough times, sometimes you start believing them. Not out loud maybe, but deep down, quietly. They become the lens through which you see yourself. But God has never called you by your wounds. He has never named you after your worst season. He does not introduce you by your failure. He does not define you by the chapter that hurt the most. He calls you by something deeper, by what he created, by what he formed, by what he still sees. Loved, known, held, called. And maybe what your soul has needed most is not more striving, not for this long-term pressure, not trying harder to become someone else. Maybe what your soul has needed, God never lost sight of me. Not then, not now, not ever. Even when I felt far away, even when I stopped recognizing myself, even when my faith felt tired, even when my heart felt distant, even when I disappeared into survival mode, God still saw me clearly. And He still does. Sometimes what feels lost, sometimes it's simply buried, covered, hidden under years of life. And those are not the same thing. Buried does not mean gone. Covered does not mean erased. Delayed does not mean dead. But when you carry pain for a long time, it can feel like the things you miss in yourself are gone forever. Your joy, your softness, your confidence, your creativity, your trust, your faith, your sense of possibility, your sense of wonder, your expectation for good things. It can feel like those things belong to another version of you. And maybe sometimes you think, that version of me isn't coming back. Maybe life took too much. Maybe too much changed. Maybe too much time passed. But what if that's not true? What if the deepest parts of you were never destroyed? What if they were simply buried beneath layers of survival? Like fire beneath ashes, still warm, still alive, just covered. If you look at ashes from a distance, they can appear cold, finished, spent. Like the fire is over, but sometimes beneath the gray, there is still heat, still movement, still flame waiting for breath. And all it takes is the right wind, the right spark, the right moment. And what looked finished begins to burn again. Maybe your spirit feels like that. Maybe from the outside things look quiet. Maybe even to you they feel quiet. But something still remains. A spark, a longing, a hunger, a memory, a piece of identity not fully gone, still alive, still waiting. Think of a seed planted in the ground. From above the surface, it looks buried, hidden, lost, invisible. Nothing seems to be happening. You see dirt, silence, stillness, and yet underneath the soil, everything is happening. Roots are stretching. Life is forming. Pressure is doing its work. What looks like burial is actually preparation. What looks like disappearance is transformation. And perhaps some of what you've mistaken for ending, perhaps some things inside you did not die. They went underground for a season, hidden beneath pain, hidden beneath responsibility, hidden beneath grief, hidden beneath exhaustion, hidden beneath years of having to keep going, but still alive, still held by God, still known by heaven, still carrying life. Maybe the dream is still there. Maybe the tenderness is still there. Maybe the courage is still there. Maybe your voice is still there. Maybe your joy is still there. Maybe your calling is still there. Maybe your hope never fully disappeared. Maybe it just got buried beneath too much weight. And if that's true, then healing is not about becoming someone completely new. Maybe healing is about uncovering, recovered, returning, remembering maybe God is not trying to replace you. Maybe He is lovingly removing the layers life piled on top of you until the real you can breathe again. That's why restoration can feel emotional. Why tears come unexpectedly. Why old memories return. Why something inside stirs when you hear certain words. Because buried things often move before they rise. And what rises first is not always strength. Sometimes it's feeling, sometimes longing, sometimes grief, sometimes desire, sometimes the aching awareness that something inside of you still wants to live again. And that desire matters, because dead things do not long for life, but buried things do. Maybe the reason your heart still aches when you hear about healing is because healing is still possible. Maybe the reason you still feel emotional when someone talks about purpose is because purpose still lives in you. Maybe the reason hope still stirs in your chest, even if only faintly, is because hope was never fully gone. Still there. It is perhaps, covered perhaps, but still there. And God sees it. Sees what remains under the ashes. He sees what remains beneath the disappointment. He sees what remains under the weariness. He sees what pain could not erase. He sees the life still hidden in the soil. And maybe very gently, he is breathing on it again. Not rushing you, not forcing you, simply awakening what has been waiting, calling what has been buried back toward the light. And little by little, the version of you thought was gone begins to rise again. Sometimes before anything changes around you, something begins changing quietly within you. Nothing on the outside looks different. Your routine is still the same. You wake up in the same room. You move through the same schedule. You pour the same coffee in the morning. You drive the same streets. You greet the same people. You sit in the same chair at the end of the day. From the outside, unchanged, but inwardly, and it can be difficult to explain because it doesn't always come as clarity. Sometimes it arrives as restlessness, a quiet discomfort, a feeling that something inside you is shifting. Maybe you felt that lately, but a moment where everything around you seems normal, yet inside you feel unsettled. Not in a fearful way, not panic, something quieter than that, something deeper, like your soul is trying to get your attention. Maybe it happens late at night when the house is finally still. Maybe it comes while driving alone with no music playing. Maybe while folding clothes fresh from the dryer. Or standing in the kitchen with your hands resting against the counter while your thoughts drift somewhere far beyond the room. Or sitting outside for a moment longer before going back in. And suddenly you feel it. That ache, that pull, that longing, and you think, why do I feel like something is calling me? Why do I feel hungry for something I can't name? Why does everything I used to rely on feel less satisfying than it used to? Why do distractions feel emptier? Why does my spirit feel restless even when nothing is technically wrong? Why does it feel like there's something deeper trying to reach me? Sometimes we call that exhaustion, sometimes burnout, sometimes stress, and sometimes it is. Sometimes it is God gently stirring what has been sleeping. Sometimes it is God drawing your attention inward. Sometimes it is the beginning of Him calling you back to Himself, back to peace, back to truth, back to prayer, back to healing, back to the version of you He has always known. And the thing about God's invitation is that it doesn't always arrive the way we expect. Many people expect God to speak through dramatic moments, through obvious signs, through loud certainty, through clear instructions. But often it feels like longing. It feels like restlessness. It feels like a hunger you cannot satisfy with busyness. It feels like tears that come for reasons you can't fully explain. It feels like emotional stirring in moments that seem ordinary. It feels like remembering something your soul knew before your mind found language for it. And sometimes it feels like being homesick without knowing exactly what home is. That feeling can be sacred. Because spiritual hunger often feels like longing before it feels like clarity. And maybe what you've been calling discomfort, maybe it's invitation. Maybe the reason you feel unsettled lately is not because you're failing. Maybe it's because something in you is waking up. Maybe God is lovingly disturbing what became too comfortable. It is not to harm you, but to awaken you. Maybe he's stirring the places you stopped listening to. The places buried beneath routine. The places hidden beneath survival. The places where your true self has been waiting quietly. And perhaps the reason certain things no longer satisfy you, because once God begins drawing someone closer, old distractions lose some of their power. Noise feels louder. Emptiness feels emptier. Busyness feels heavier. And what used to numb no longer works the same way. Because the soul knows when it is thirsty. And thirsty souls search for water. Maybe that thirst is leading you back to the well. Maybe that ache is leading you back to prayer. Maybe that longing is leading you back to yourself. And maybe more than anything, it is God saying gently, come back. Come back to the place where we speak honestly. Come back to trust. Come back to peace. Come back to hope. Come back to the dreams you buried. Come back to the parts of you that pain made go quiet. And back to me. It has always been about restoration. Not for this, walk into this, but I'm really inside restoration. Not, but let me walk with you back to who you are. And maybe that invitation is happening even now, in this moment. Personally, I know where you've been. I know what it cost you. I know how tired you are. And I also know who you still are beneath it all. Come back. When people hear the words, come back to God, sometimes it sounds beautiful, but also overwhelming. Because where do you begin when you feel far away? Where do you begin after years of carrying pain? After disappointment? After unanswered questions? After becoming someone you barely recognize? Where do you even start? The beautiful thing is, God has never asked anyone to return perfectly. He only asks them to return honestly. That's where it begins. Not with his strength, not with impressive faith, not with his having everything figured out, not with fixing yourself first. Just honesty. Simple honesty. Honesty in its rawest form. Sometimes not even full sentences. Just truth. The kind of truth whispered quietly in a tired room. God, I feel lost. God, I'm tired. God, I want you. That prayer matters more than many people realize. Because healing often begins not when we become strong, but when we finally stop pretending we are. Not when we sound spiritual, but when we sound real. So if you want to return, begin there. Tell him the truth, not polished truth, not rehearsed words, not the version you think he wants to hear. Your real truth. Tell him if you feel disappointed. Tell him. Tell him. If you feel tired, tell him. If your faith feels weak, tell him. If you feel far away, tell him. God is not intimidated by honesty. He already sees everything, and he welcomes you anyway. There is something deeply healing about not needing to hide. You can sit on the edge of your bed in silence, or in your parked car before work, or in your kitchen before anyone wakes up, and simply say, Lord, here I am. And that can be enough. This part is hard and sacred, because many people try to heal without grieving. They rush forward without acknowledging what was lost. But grief has a purpose. Sometimes you must grieve not only what happened to you, but what it changed in you. Grieve the years you spent surviving. Grieve the version of yourself that became exhausted. Grieve the dreams that were postponed. Grieve the confidence that faded. Grieve the softness you lost while protecting yourself. Grieve without shame, because grief does not mean weakness. It means something mattered deeply, and what mattered deserves honesty. Healing often begins with permission to mourn. Pain names people. So does failure. So does rejection. So does betrayal. And after enough time, those names can feel real. Too late, too broken, not enough. Unwanted, forgotten, unqualified, behind. But those are not heaven's words over you. Those are wounds speaking. Those are painful memories speaking. Those are old voices speaking. God calls you by something deeper. Loved, known, chosen, held, redeemed. Learning to return means learning which voice to stop believing, and learning which voice to trust again. That takes time and repetition and grace. But little by little, false labels lose power when truth is repeated often enough. Prayer does not need to sound impressive to be real. Sometimes the holiest prayer is the simplest. Help me, stay with me. Give me strength. Show me who I am again. Heal what hurts. Lead me one step forward. Prayer can happen anywhere. While driving, while walking, while making coffee in the early morning before the day begins. God is not waiting for perfect words. He listens for an open heart. And even small prayers can reopen places that have been closed for years. You do not need to rebuild your life in one day. You do not need all the answers before moving. You do not need complete confidence before taking the next step. Sometimes healing begins very quietly with one small act of courage. Read again, write again, pray again, rest again, create again, dream again, trust again, speak again, hope again, one step. That's enough. And often God meets us there in ordinary steps, repeated faithfully until one day, without even realizing when it happened. You begin breathing differently, thinking differently, praying differently, hoping differently, and slowly, gently, the version of you heaven has always known begins to feel familiar again. There's something difficult about being in the middle of change, especially when you can feel something shifting inside you, but you can't fully explain what it is yet. You know something is happening. You can sense movement. You feel different somehow, but nothing feels finished. Nothing feels settled. And because it's unfinished, it can feel confusing, sometimes even discouraging. Because when people picture breakthrough, they often picture clarity, strength, victory, immediate answers, a sudden moment where everything becomes obvious, where pain disappears, where the sky opens and everything makes sense. But real breakthrough often doesn't arrive like that. More often, it begins quietly. Notice, it begins underneath, deep within places nobody else can see. And sometimes, not even you can fully see it yet. It can feel messy, uncomfortable, like something inside is being loosened after being held tightly for years. Like something frozen is beginning to thaw. And when thawing begins, there is movement, there is feeling, there is tenderness, there is release. That's why healing can feel emotional before it feels peaceful. Why rebuilding can feel unstable before it feels strong. why awakening can feel disorienting before it feels beautiful. And if that's where you are, if lately you felt emotional in ways you didn't expect, more reflective, more sensitive, more aware, please hear this clearly. That does not necessarily mean you're falling apart. It may mean something in you is finally waking up. Maybe you've cried more lately and don't know why. Maybe certain memories keep resurfacing. Maybe conversations affect you more deeply than they used to. Maybe old dreams you buried years ago keep returning to your mind. Maybe things you once ignored now suddenly feel important again. Maybe your heart has felt softer, more open, more tender. And maybe that scares you a little. Because after spending so long learning how to survive, softness can feel unfamiliar, even unsafe. When you've spent years staying strong, being needed, being dependable, holding everything together, feeling deeply again can feel overwhelming. But sometimes feeling again is evidence of healing, because numbness often protects pain. And when healing begins, which means emotions rise to the surface, tears come unexpectedly, memories return, longing returns, hope returns, and yes, sometimes pain returns too, but not always to harm you. Sometimes pain resurfaces because healing has finally reached the place where the wound was hidden. And healing hidden places takes courage. Maybe what's happening inside you right now is not collapse. Maybe it's release. Maybe it's restoration. Maybe it's God carefully rebuilding what life wore down. Piece by piece, prayer by prayer, moment by moment, faithfully. And because it's happening gradually, you may miss how much has already changed. Sometimes breakthrough doesn't look dramatic from the outside. Sometimes it looks small, like laughing sincerely for the first time in a while, like waking up with a little less heaviness than yesterday, like opening your Bible again, like praying honestly again, like breathing more deeply, like feeling peace for a few moments in the middle of a stressful day, like imagining the future without immediately fearing it, like allowing yourself to hope, like hearing yourself say, maybe things can change, maybe I can heal, maybe I'm not as far gone as I thought. These moments seem small, but they matter deeply. Because breakthrough often begins in the small hidden places before it ever becomes visible. A seed underground does not look impressive, but it is still becoming. Roots growing underground are invisible, but they are still growing. And just because something is hidden does not mean nothing is happening. You may feel unseen in your process, but heaven sees every inch of it. Every small act of courage, every prayer whispered when you felt weak, every day you chose not to give up, every time you trusted God while still carrying unanswered questions, perhaps every time you stood back up after an emotionally heavy day, every time you kept going when your strength felt thin, every time you hoped again after disappointment. He sees it all, and He is working within it. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. You are not broken beyond restoration. You are not disqualified because the journey has been longer than you expected. You are not failing because healing feels slow. You are not losing because growth feels uncomfortable. You are being rebuilt, and rebuilding takes time. God is not rushing you. He is not disappointed in your pace. He is not measuring your worth by how quickly you recover. It is not demanding perfection from your process. He is walking with you through it, patiently, lovingly, faithfully. And maybe what feels like your breaking point is actually your rebuilding point. Maybe what feels like an ending. Maybe what feels fragile. And maybe quietly, gently, like sunrise before the light reaches the whole sky. If you've stayed with me all the way to this moment, perhaps something in your spirit already knows why. Maybe one sentence stayed with you. Maybe one memory rose unexpectedly while listening. Maybe there was a moment your eyes filled with tears and you didn't fully know why. That just felt heavy. Or lighter. Maybe something inside you felt seen, recognized, named. And maybe that feeling surprised you. Because perhaps you didn't realize how much of this you were carrying until now. That happens sometimes. We carry things so long, they begin to feel normal. Until one day something touches a hidden place and suddenly we realize, this still matters, this still hurts, this still lives in me. And if something has been stirred in you while listening, don't rush past it. Don't dismiss it too quickly. Don't bury it again because life gets busy. Stay with it for a moment. Let yourself feel it. Because not every stirring is random. Some are sacred. Some are invitations. And maybe this moment is one of them. Maybe this is not just another message you listen to today. Maybe this is a moment where God quietly met you where you are. In your living room, at your kitchen table, on your couch late at night, wherever you are right now. Maybe he met you there, not with pressure, not with accusation, but with mercy. Not to remind you how far you've drifted, but to remind you how close he still is. And perhaps he's saying gently, come back, come back. Come back to peace. Come back to hope. Come back to healing. Come back to who I created you to be. Come back to the version of you I never stopped loving. So before you move on with the rest of your day, before the noise returns, before responsibilities call for your attention again, let's pause here together. If you can, take one slow breath. And if your heart feels open, Heavenly Father, thank you for the person listening right now. Thank you because you know them fully. You know the parts they speak about openly and the parts they keep hidden. You know their history. You know their heartbreak. You know their disappointments. You know what they lost. You know what they carry quietly. You know the burdens no one else sees. You know the prayers they once prayed with tears. You know the nights they felt alone. You know the questions they never found answers for. And still you watched over them. You did not for this, still you loved them. Father, I ask you now to bring healing into every wounded place. But I'm really exhaustion. Where there is confusion, bring peace. Where there is grief, bring comfort. Where there is fear, where there is shame, where identity has been buried, where hope has grown quiet, let hope rise again. Where pain has covered over joy, remind them of who they are in you. Remind them they are not forgotten, not too late, not too broken, not abandoned, not overlooked, not beyond healing. Restore their confidence, restore their peace, restore their faith, restore their voice, restore the parts of them life tried to bury. Awaken purpose again, awaken calling again, awaken hope again, and give them courage not to become someone new, but to return to who you always knew they were. Walk with them from this moment forward. Stay close in the quiet moments. Stay close in the difficult moments. Not for this, stay close in the rebuilding. And let them feel your presence in a real and personal way. In Jesus' name, amen. And before you leave, If this message found you at the right moment, if something in your spirit feels awake right now, if you feel God calling you back to yourself, I want to invite you to write just 4 simple words in the comments. I'm coming back. Not as performance, not because you have everything figured out, but as a quiet yes, a personal response, a step toward home. Then if you're not ready to write anything, just don't ignore what your heart felt here. Sit with it. Pray with it. Carry it with you. Let God continue speaking after this video ends. Because sometimes the end of a message is actually the beginning of restoration. And I want to leave you with this. The real you was never abandoned, never forgotten, never erased. The version of you buried beneath pain, hidden beneath disappointment, covered beneath years of survival. Heaven still knows that person by name. And God never gave up on that version of you. Not for one day, not for one. The Napitus, and even now,